All right, folks, Brandon Chapman with you today. It's another Theo Night video from TheoTrade, obviously. It's October 11th, 2021. It is Columbus Day, so bond markets closed, stock markets opened, and bond markets, in terms of ETFs, not doing so hot. And we'll look at the sector and other performance, but today's topic is based on a mixed up Monday. And you couldn't define it better than saying mixed up. As we look at the broader S&P, the future is finishing in the cash edge about 0.78% lower towards the low of the session. What began as kind of an optimistic day turned rather bearish quickly. Coming to this week, I thought we'd really see an opportunity to see more strength in financials before the earnings and weakness in technology. And boy, that really flipped on its head today, as financials early on were up nicely, but just wilted throughout the course of the trading session and finished near the lows of the session as well. So really kind of flipping on its head a dynamic that it really seemed like it was poised to do with some rather bearish activity in technology and bullish activity in financials, particularly on Bank of America leading into this week. And when I say bullish activity, I'm talking about unusual option activity, for example, on Bank of America. But that thesis did not play out, but we did see a scenario. There's this concept called risk parity. I mean, in theory, that if stocks are having an ugly day, generally speaking, you're going to see that bonds, in particular treasury bonds, should perform rather well. Now, if you look at TNX, of course, bonds being closed today, we're not really getting any data intraday. But you can look at funds like IEF, for example, or TLT on the longer end of the curve. And normally speaking, that if the market's down, you'd expect to see strength in bonds. And that's just not what you saw today. In fact, if you look at the option activity, a 22 oct expiration in here, right there at about the 140 strike. So about 8,500 puts mostly bought today. Really looking at some more downside in the treasury space. Now, generally speaking, if treasury prices go down, treasury yields go up, normally that would be good for banks, but banks were the third worst performing sector today, down 1%, right on the nose. Now, of course, if you've been following China and some of the spillover effect of Evergrande, obviously this may be creating a negative impact here. I mean, a lot of analysts are expecting bank earnings to be rather robust this quarter. But again, if you saw the news cycle over the weekend, it definitely looked like some of the bond market in China was a concern. And maybe that's what caused some spillover after the open today that added to the weakness. But financials just did not end up well. And if you look down here, also utilities. So again, with bond yields potentially looking to rise, that's generally bad for utilities, but generally speaking, also bad for real estate. Normally, you'd expect those two to probably go together. And in particular, when you start to consider the selling that we're seeing right now in HYG. Of course, this is something we've talked about for the last couple of weeks as an area of weakness, significant option activity to the bearish end. And we're actually breaking some support the last two sessions on Friday and today. And today, breaking the support or the low from May 18th. Normally, you'd expect to see a sell-off in high yield credit. That would create higher borrowing costs, and that's generally not great for utilities and, by the way, real estate. But for some reason, real estate actually finished up a little bit today, 0.13%, and was the best performing sector, followed by materials. And as you look in the metal space, that strength was not exactly felt in gold, which finished down in the session. But as you look at more of the industrial metals part of the space, FCX finished higher today, faded from the high. If you look at steel, for example, finished higher today, but did fade. An iron ore miner like Cliffs, for example, higher in the session, but faded. They didn't really finish all that strong on today's session. Again, kind of just combining with this theme of initial bullishness that really faded into the close. And we're looking at, again, maybe a continuation in the downside here in bond prices, higher yields. And this is where it gets interesting. If we start to see selling in treasuries and we see yields continue to rise, and we couple that with declining stock prices, this is something you just don't see that often, which we did get, for example, last year during the Corona crash. Again, maybe all this discussion of spending and trillions of dollars of deficits and perpetuity maybe it's starting to weigh here. But I would guess at some point that may start to normalize in the risk period of return. But for right now, it is causing a little bit of uncertainty and clearly some turmoil. As you look at some of the top stocks today, Schlumberger, for example, Halliburton, was in the mix as well at one point today. Both companies that saw also some significant option activity. KMI, another one. So energy remains strong. A stock that I commented last week, Oracle, saw some good option activity last week, kind of continues trade, although like many faded from today's high. As you look at the stocks that have performed the worst, and you look down here, Morgan Stanley, EMR, Visa, MasterCard, JP Morgan, it's really dominated by that financial space, are the stocks that finished largely lower and leading the S&P 100 down today. A couple of stocks that are interesting to look at. Verizon, of course, this is a communications stock. It's a dividend payer. Down big today, down on nearly 2%. They do have earnings coming up on October 20th. Now, part and parcel with this decline, there was some bullish activity that came in today at the lows. You'll see the 19-no 5250 call for about $1. So again, you think about 10,000 shares. That's about $1 million trade filled in one print at the 5250 strike. Again, some expectation we may be forming a little bit of support here, but I'll tell you again, this is a stock that may have more downside here, but at least you have somebody stepping in with $1 million saying, hey, I think there might be a chance. Maybe it's just a near-term bottom in Verizon. Maybe a shot at maybe pulling back and retesting 54, but again, some bullish activity in Verizon. Another stock today that had some bullish activity in it was also CVS. This is one that happened a bit earlier. Again, the stock did fade from its highs here. But on CVS, it was a 22 October expiration. It was out here at the 87 strike, and this is the second print in 3 trading days. So Thursday and again today. Again, maybe looking to retest the highs up here, 87.50, maybe run towards 90. Of course, again fading with the market late. DBA. So when you think about energy, another space that's done really well is agriculture. Of course, fertilizer prices reaching record highs. DBA was down a little bit today, but again, 24, 25 long call vertical for January. So we're talking January 2023. So this is a ways out there, but again, you can see just the long-term expectation that agricultural prices are going to rise. And of course, if you look at some of the companies that are some of the better performers, as far as companies that are in fertilizer, for example, CF is one. Clearly, Mosaic. We had some bullish activity last week. It's continuing to move up nearly 3.76% and closing near the highs of the session. One other trade here that had some interesting activity today is VRAY. Again, not a huge, but it's back down against support at around 650. As we look at the options here, again, the spreads are not great, not super liquid. We don't even have weekly options. Could be a potential stock trade, but you'll see 10,000 contracts traded today at the $7 strike, got filled at the ask. So again, some bullish interest coming in at the 7 today. So again, that's a little bit away. Maybe looking for retest the prior high at about 750. It's about $1 potential move on a $6.43 stock. Well, folks, I hope this is helpful. I hope this gives you some trade ideas and some things to look for this week as we're coming up on bank earnings, which is going to be big for the market to see how those do perform. And more importantly, they may beat, but do they sell off in response to all the other stuff that's happening? We'll get a look at that this week. It was great being with you. Have a good one. Thank you.